It started with the kind of silence that isn't born of peace, but of something suffocating. A heavy quiet settled over our apartment like dust on forgotten shelves. It was just past midnight, the air warm with summer's breath and thick with unsaid words. I remember the flickering light above the kitchen sink and how his silhouette leaned on the counter like he owned the room, like he owned me. His words had been few that night, clipped, cold, and each one sharper than the last. We had argued before, of course. We were married, weren't we? But something about this fight curled differently in my chest. It had started over something, laughably mundane. I think I asked him if he could help with the dishes. That's all it took. The request landed like an accusation, and he erupted with that tone he used when he felt cornered, when he needed to remind the world that he was never to be inconvenienced. His voice rose, louder and louder, bouncing off the walls like a slammed door. "I work all day," he said, spitting the words like venom. "And you, what do you even do?" That alone stung more than I expected, but I let it pass. I shouldn't have. It was when he stepped closer, jaw tight and nostrils flaring, that he said the thing that would change everything. "You're replaceable." 3 words. Flat, measured, indifferent. A sentence that cracked the marrow of my bones. I stood there frozen, my hands still wet from the dish soap, trembling slightly as the sponge dropped into the sink with a soft thud. For a moment, the world slowed. I looked into his eyes, those same eyes I once thought held warmth, laughter, protection. But there was nothing now, no apology, no hesitation. Just a man who had said what he truly believed, as easily as someone might swat away a fly. Replaceable. The word echoed in my mind over and over again. It didn't matter what came after, his huffing, his retreat into the living room, the way he picked up his phone and started scrolling like the conversation, like I didn't exist. It didn't matter that I didn't cry. The tears didn't come. What came instead was something else, something quieter, stronger. A kind of clarity that only shows up when someone you love shows you exactly who they are. I went to the bedroom and shut the door behind me, gently. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at my hands like they might hold an answer. The apartment was still. The city outside hummed. But inside me, something had shifted. This wasn't sadness. It was awakening. He had called me replaceable. And now, with each beat of my heart, I started to believe him. But not in the way he meant. Maybe I was replaceable, to him. But he had just proven something far more damning. He was replaceable too. I didn't need him. I didn't need this version of love, the kind that withheld kindness, that belittled instead of built, that tore me down under the guise of honesty. At 12:47 a.m., I stood up. I took a shower, hot and slow. I watched the steam rise and imagined all the times I had made excuses for him evaporating into the night air. I toweled off and looked in the mirror for longer than I had in months. My reflection stared back like she had been waiting to be seen. I opened the closet and began to pack. Not my things, not yet. His. Every drawer, every corner, I filled with his belongings. His socks, his shirts, his favorite whiskey glass. I found the box he kept from college, the one with old photos and ticket stubs, and shoved it in a duffel. I was methodical, silent, like I was moving through a ritual. Not angry. Just done. At 1:34 a.m., I sent a single text to his friend, Josh, the one he always stayed with after their poker nights. "Hey, can you come get David? He's had a few drinks. Not a good night. Don't want him driving." A lie, yes, but one he'd believe. Josh would come, and David would go. I left the bags by the door and sat on the couch, cross-legged, wrapped in a blanket, waiting. When David finally walked back into the room around 2:05 a.m., bleary-eyed and annoyed, He looked at the bags like they were some kind of threat. "What's all this?" he asked, frowning. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Your replacement process starts tonight." His laugh was forced. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You said I was replaceable," I said, each word slow, deliberate. "Turns out, so are you." His eyes widened just a fraction, the mask slipping. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I tilted my head. "I packed your things. Josh is on his way. You're leaving tonight." He looked at me like I had slapped him. The shock, the disbelief, it was almost funny. He didn't think I could do it. He never did. Because when men like David say replaceable, they don't think you'll call their bluff. But I wasn't bluffing, not anymore. He stood there for a long moment, lips parted slightly, as though trying to decide which version of himself to wear. The man who begs, or the man who belittles. For the first time, I saw him falter. Not out of love, not because he was sorry, but because he was caught off guard. He never thought I'd call him on it. He had always treated our relationship like it was a safe house, somewhere he could run to without ever fearing the locks would change. But that night, I changed every lock in my heart. "You're seriously kicking me out?" he said, stepping toward the bags. His voice raised half an octave like disbelief was supposed to undo what had been done. I nodded, my voice still calm. "Yes." His fingers twitched, one hand reaching for his phone, the other raking through his hair. "This is insane. You're really going to throw away everything we have over a fight?" That word, throw away, made my stomach tighten. As if I was the one discarding something valuable, when he was the one who'd been treating me like a placeholder, a standby. Every dinner I'd made, every hour I waited up for him when he came home late and didn't bother to call. Every smile I gave when I didn't feel like smiling. Every time I swallowed my pride just to keep peace in the house. He hadn't seen those things as love. He'd seen them as expected. And that night, his voice wasn't panicked with heartbreak. It was panicked with inconvenience. He didn't fear losing me. He feared losing his comfort. "You told me I was replaceable, David." That wasn't a mistake. That was what you really believed. I saw it in your eyes. I heard it in your voice. You didn't stutter. You didn't regret it. And if I hadn't packed your bags, if I hadn't said a word, you'd still be scrolling on your phone right now pretending it never happened. "I was angry," he began. "No," I cut him off, standing now. "You were honest. You said what you meant because you thought it wouldn't cost you anything." I walked past him, opened the door, and leaned against the frame, arms folded. "It cost you everything." The hallway light spilled into the apartment, casting a faint yellow glow over the hardwood floor. In the distance, I heard the elevator ding. His ride had arrived. He looked at the door, then back at me, as if he still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that I wasn't crying, begging him to stay, promising to do better. That's the part he didn't expect. The silence in me. The resolve. "I don't have anywhere to go," he muttered, softer now, but I could tell it wasn't vulnerability. It was manipulation, his last card. "You have friends. You have options. But you don't have me. Not anymore." He looked down, and for a flicker of a second, I saw something crack in his face. Not sorrow, not love, but confusion. Like a man who finally realized the well had dried and still couldn't understand why water no longer poured from it. Josh's knock came next, a quick, confused double tap. I opened the door wider and stepped back. David picked up his bag slowly, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. He reached the door, turned to say something, but I closed it before he could. I leaned back against it, and the breath that left me wasn't heavy. It was light, strange. Not relief exactly, not yet. But the beginning of it. My heart was racing. My hands shook. But inside, that adrenaline was something more powerful. Finality. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness that had once felt lonely but now felt earned. I looked at the empty chair across from me and felt a sharp pang, like grief, because even when someone is wrong for you, even when they hurt you, their absence still echoes. But it was a clean wound, one I could heal. By morning, I had already begun to make changes. I changed the password on the Wi-Fi, the lock code on the front door, and ordered new sheets. Small things, symbolic, necessary. I sat down at my computer and wrote an email to my boss asking for a few personal days. She responded within the hour. Take whatever time you need. The kindness in that sentence made tears spring to my eyes more than anything David had said in months. I made a list of things to donate. Shoes he never wore but made me organize. Books he never read but liked people to see on the shelf. I boxed them all. The hours passed. I moved with quiet purpose. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I allowed myself to remember the good times, but I refused to weaponize them against myself. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We chain ourselves to memories and call it loyalty. But love isn't meant to be a shackle. By late afternoon, I sat in the middle of my newly rearranged living room, the air smelling of lemon polish and lavender spray. I played music, not sad music, not breakup songs, but soft jazz, the kind that fills a room without asking for attention. And that's when it hit me. Not a wave of sadness, but the first taste of something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not power over him. Not revenge. Just autonomy. My life. My rules. My space. That night, I slept alone. No arguments, no passive-aggressive sighs. Just me, under new sheets, in a room that finally felt like it belonged to someone who mattered. Me. The next morning, sunlight crept into the apartment as if testing the waters, unsure of the new atmosphere it would find. It slipped through the curtains and landed across the hardwood floor, gilding the silence with gold. I woke up to that light. For a moment, I didn't remember everything that had happened. Not because it was a dream, but because the peace I felt was so unfamiliar. I thought maybe I had been reborn into a different life. And in some ways, I had. I stayed in bed while listening to the stillness. There were no footsteps across the hall, no bathroom door slamming shut, no drawers yanked open with impatience. The usual chorus of morning tension was gone. It was just me, breathing. I stretched my limbs slowly, like an animal easing back into its body after a long hibernation. Then I rolled onto my side and stared at the empty pillow beside me. It still held the indentation of his head. I stared at that hollow dip in the fabric for far longer than I should have. Not because I wanted him back, but because ghosts linger even when the body is gone. Eventually, I got up. I made coffee exactly how I liked it. Not too strong, with a pinch of cinnamon the way he always said was weird. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, holding the warm mug to my chest, and felt something tender open inside me. I was doing this. I was still here. And it wasn't just surviving, it was living. I spent most of the morning cleaning, not just the surface stuff, but the deep, gritty corners I'd ignored for too long. The closet where his winter coat still hung. The bottom drawer of the dresser where he stuffed old receipts and tangled headphones and ticket stubs from concerts we'd never talked about again. I pulled everything out. Each item was a piece of him, but also a reflection of who I had been. While loving him, the organizer, the forgiver, the pacifier, every object I touched told a story. The cologne bottle half used, the leather watch I'd gifted him on our 3rd anniversary, the movie stubs from that rainy night in March. I held each thing with reverence, but not sentimentality. I wasn't mourning. I was making space. Not for someone else, God no, but for myself. There was a small notebook I found in the nightstand drawer, one I hadn't opened in years. I had bought it with the idea of journaling my thoughts, back when I still believed he'd be interested in knowing them. I flipped through it. The pages were mostly blank, save for a few scratchy sentences here and there. He forgot again. He said I'm too sensitive. I keep thinking love should feel better than this. My chest tightened reading them. I had been writing those notes to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I had been breadcrumbing my own sanity, leaving behind signs that the pain was real, even when I kept telling myself to move past it. I closed the notebook and placed it in a drawer. My drawer now. It wasn't a record of failure. It was a testament to resilience. By noon, I was sweating from all the movement, my arms sore from hauling boxes, my hair pulled back in a loose, damp bun. I looked around at the transformed apartment, the rearranged bookshelves, the new framed photos of friends and family, the living room that no longer revolved around his tastes. It looked like me. For the first time, it actually looked like me. I showered again and put on the sundress he once said made me look too eager. I wore it anyway. I wore it defiantly. I wore it like armor stitched with flowers. Then I went outside. I walked to the cafe down the street, the one I always suggested and he always dismissed in favor of his preferred bar. The bar where the TVs never stopped flashing sports highlights, and I had to yell to be heard. The cafe was quiet, filled with plants and warm light and the scent of cardamom and roasted beans. I ordered an iced coffee and sat by the window. As I watched people pass by on the sidewalk, I felt a strange warmth in my throat. Not grief, not joy. Something softer. Something that felt like re-entry into the world. Like I'd been orbiting someone else's needs and was finally landing on solid ground again. A young woman sat down a few tables away with a baby stroller. She looked exhausted but happy, smiling down at her child like the world was still worth loving. I caught her eye. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. It was the kind of smile that had no agenda, just recognition. A we're both here kind of moment. It felt good. I stayed there for over an hour, just sipping and thinking and existing. When I returned to the apartment, I opened the windows wide. The city air poured in, rich with sound and motion. A delivery truck rumbled past. Somewhere, down the block, someone was playing an acoustic guitar. Birds flitted across the rooftop ledge across the street. The world hadn't changed, but I had. That night, I cooked dinner for myself. A real dinner. Pasta with blistered tomatoes, fresh basil, and garlic. A glass of wine. I even set the table, just for me. No TV on in the background. No distracted scrolling across from me. Just a candle flickering and the quiet rhythm of my fork against the plate. I wasn't celebrating. I was honoring something. My own return. When I went to bed, the empty side still made my heart ache, but not because I wanted him there. Because for the first time, I could hear myself breathe, and the sound was beautiful. The days that followed unfolded like a slow exhale, each one peeling back layers I didn't realize I had been wearing for years. Grief didn't slam into me all at once. It came in fragments, like scattered rain on pavement. Not for him, not. For the man he turned out to be, but for the version of myself I had abandoned to love him. I missed her more than I missed him. That was the real heartbreak. I spent more time outside, walks without purpose, grocery runs where I let myself linger, in aisles I once rushed through. I went to the bookstore around the corner and bought 2 novels, neither of which he would have approved of. "Why do you always read that emotional stuff?" he used to say, with a laugh that made me feel smaller than I already did. But that was the point. He liked me small. Small was easier to control. Small didn't leave, but I had left, and with each passing day, I grew. Not in sudden, triumphant bursts, but in soft, quiet ways. The way I woke up before my alarm because I was finally sleeping soundly. The way I caught my own reflection and no longer flinched. The way I filled the apartment with music, not to drown out the silence, but to celebrate it. One afternoon, maybe a week after he'd left, I received a text. Just his name lighting up my phone screen sent a jolt through my spine. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over it, my heart bracing for impact. Eventually, I read it. I miss you. I didn't mean what I said. Can we talk? Simple. Predictable. A message written not with sincerity, but with the expectation that my forgiveness was still on the table, waiting like an obedient dog. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, not even anger, but because he didn't deserve access to this version of me. The woman he thought was replaceable no longer existed. She had shed her skin in the dark hours of that night and was now someone else entirely, someone whole. A few days later, another message arrived. I messed up. I see that now. You didn't deserve what I said. I was in a bad place. And then, when I still didn't respond, a third. So that's it? After everything? That one made me laugh. A short, dry laugh that didn't even make it to my chest. Everything, he said, as if all those years of diminishing my worth, of subtle dismissals and half-hearted apologies, were a foundation I was supposed to keep building on. I blocked his number after that. Not because I feared what he might say, but because it no longer mattered. His words had lost their power. The same mouth that once made my heart race now only brought relief in its absence. I began journaling again. Not like before, not cryptic, desperate scribbles tucked away in drawers, but real writing, honest, raw. I wrote about how I'd forgotten the sound of my own laugh. I wrote about the woman I had been, timid, careful, waiting for affection like a prize instead of expecting it like a right. I wrote about the little girl I used to be, the one who once danced barefoot in the grass and believed love was soft. I promised her I would find softness again. Eventually, I met friends for drinks, the kind of friends I hadn't seen much during my marriage because he always found a reason not to like them. They're just drama, he'd say, or they don't respect our relationship. But the truth was, he didn't respect my independence. He feared it. And seeing them again, laughing and catching up, felt like stepping back into a room I had forgotten existed inside myself. One night, while walking home, I passed by a couple arguing on a stoop. The man's voice was sharp, dismissive, and the woman was quiet, looking down at her hands. I knew that posture. I had lived inside that silence. I didn't stop or interfere, but I whispered something to myself as I passed. Leave. You are not a problem. You are not too much. You are not replaceable. Time. Moved on. So did I. I redecorated. Nothing dramatic, but enough to shift the energy. A new rug, brighter curtains, a fresh coat of paint in the hallway, a soft sage green that reminded me of calm mornings and new beginnings. I hung up artwork I had always wanted but never bought because he said it was too feminine. Now, the walls bloomed with color and stories of me. Months passed. The ache faded into a distant hum. I didn't forget him. I simply stopped giving him a seat at the table of my thoughts. When I walked by familiar restaurants or heard certain songs, I didn't flinch anymore. His name became a neutral sound, a chapter closed without resentment. One morning in early autumn, I woke up before dawn. The sky was just beginning to lighten, soft blues blending into lavender. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee, the city still sleepy beneath me, and I felt it, truly felt it, that I was okay. Not just surviving, not just coping. I was okay. That morning, I wrote a letter I would never send. To the man who called. Me replaceable, thank you. Thank you for saying the thing that broke the illusion. Thank you for shattering the fantasy so cleanly that I could no longer pretend to hold it together. Thank you for showing me that love built on fear, control, and silence is not love at all. I forgive you. Not because you asked for it, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry you into the future I'm building for myself. This freedom, this peace, this rising, it belongs to me now. Goodbye. I burned the letter in, a candle flame. Watched the paper curl and blacken and lift into ash, and then I opened the window. Let it all fly away. The story of me and him was over, but the story of me had just begun.